Okie dokie. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I'm expecting a lot more to join over time. We've got a fabulous session that's we put together for you here, and we've got a great set of speakers. My name is Gurpreet Singh. I'm from Ethical Reading. I'm one of the founders of Ethical Reading. I'll give a little bit of an introduction to Ethical Reading as we get underway. And then we'll get into a panel discussion, and after that we'll open up for sort of general Q&A. So without further ado, let me just kick off and talk a little bit about Ethical Reading and who we are. So we're a not-for-profit social enterprise. We're actually organised and structured as a community interest company. We launched in January 2018, and our mission is to help embed ethics into the way we do business and to help make Reading a better place to live and work, a great place to live and work. We want to do that by inspiring people and providing resources and education. And we want to do these things through collaboration. We want to inspire people that they do have a choice when it comes to decisions, and we want people to be able to make those decisions in the round, taking into account not just the profit motive, and that of course is a key driver for businesses, but also the impact on people and the environment. We run a series of different types of events, and we have some programs such as sustainability, with some initiatives like the Trees for Reading program, where we're planting urban trees, particularly in central Reading and deprived areas where there is very little canopy cover. We have other, programs such as the Wellbeing program and the Healthy and Ethical Workplaces initiative within that. We also have a business ethics program. So we want to provide through those programs resources, capabilities for change for the better locally, so that businesses can connect with local communities in making the environment better and making Reading a better place for everyone. We do believe that collaboration is the key to achieving this. We're very small, and working together as a group with others, we can achieve a lot more than just doing it by ourselves. And what we want to do is to create a community, if you like, of like-minded organizations that work together to make a real difference in our backyard, in our patch, if you will. And we hope that, we can create a kind of a template here that we can then share with other cities. And there are other cities that are interested in what we're doing and keeping a close watch. And actually it's a global thing. So Melbourne's very interested, Omaha in the US is interested, and Oxford just up the road is interested as well, to see how we get on and the kinds of learnings that we can provide them to develop their own ethical cities initiatives. So I'm delighted today to have a very eminent panel of speakers, and kicking that off, if you like, in terms of that slide in front of you there, we've got Akhil, and Akhil Handa is the founder and CEO of Earth 51. He's one of our partners, and his organization is really there to help businesses embrace sustainability and to create purpose-led organizations. So it's about creating positive change through creating better businesses for a better world. So he's a signatory member of the United Nations Global Compact. And as he was saying, introducing himself to the other speakers, is very much concerned about the technology's impact for good in the world, improving the level of representation of women in STEM, in the STEM arena, and sort of gender equality in general. We've got Dr. Vivek Tandon. He is the CEO of Perpetual Technologies. And so this is a a revolutionary approach, no less, to the way recycling is done for plastic bottles. And I understand that when he talks later, he's got some props with us. So I'm looking forward to that. In addition to all of that, he's held several leadership roles in the past, including being a director of Greenco Group, which is a renewable energy company in India, and he was vice chairman of the Allied Technology Group. We've got Erica, and Erica is an eco-designer and business strategy maker, and she's inspired by the designs of nature and is particularly focused on sustainability, the circular economy, and broad system change. And she runs Technical Nature, which is an independent design or redesign studio that is concerned with cultivating considered design and tech for life. She works with schools and young people, a bunch of entrepreneurial activities, if I can say the word, and also co-leads a Reading branch of the Global Circular Economy Club. She co-founded the Open Source Circular Economy Days and is a member of the Right to Repair. And you might have heard about that. There was some recent legislation across the EU before Brexit happened. She's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Arts. We're very lucky to have Peter Moore, who's the head of climate strategy at the Reading Borough Council. So he's heavily involved in all of these concepts and what it means in our backyard. So Peter will be particularly talking and will be available here to answer your questions, in particular about how concepts like the circular economy can be applied more locally. Joe, welcome back, Joe. So Joe did a session for us a couple of years ago on the circular economy, which is very popular. And Joe is the editor-in-chief of Circulate from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And of course, they are big supporters of the circular economy and played a big part in evangelizing it. He's been with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation since 2011, he's very much involved with communicating about this topic to thought leaders and other businesses, so we're very much looking forward to his ideas and thoughts in terms of who the movers and shakers are in this space as well. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an overview of the speakers today. And as I said, it's quite a very impressive team. So first of all, I'm going to turn to Erica. Erica, perhaps you can explain a little bit for us about what is meant by the circular economy, because there will be some of us here who don't know too much about it. It'll be a new concept to some of us. Can you give us a little bit of a flavour of what we mean by the circular economy, and perhaps also relate it to some of the other terms that are out there that people might have come across? And the other one that comes to mind is the donut economy, for example. I think Kate Raworth that's her idea.
Yeah, a lot of eco-jargon terms and things around coming all the time. I think I'll start and give a bit of a flavour, and I'm sure we'll probably, between us and the panel, kind of build it up throughout the session as well. But for me, actually, I think to think about the circular economy, I almost had to step back and look at where we are right now with our current economy, because we often don't think about the system that surrounds us and how that's really working and what is an economy going on at that point. So when we look at that, and I think myself as a designer who make products and started to see it from this very kind of, we call it like a linear economy approach. And when you step back, a lot of how the goods and the services and how people make money and buy and sustain their living at the moment is very much on a linear level. And this is when we think about taking resources from the earth. A lot of businesses, are around manufacturing them into products and selling them. I mean, that's a huge part, the selling of them, and as much as possible. Then we use them. Some of them don't last that long. Some of them break quite fast. And actually the manufacturers maybe don't really care about, or it's not their responsibility anymore. And then it reaches the end of life. And quite often, no one really thought about that at the beginning. And the economy we have at the moment means that quite a lot of that ends up being disposed of, quite a lot still landfill or energy from waste, incineration, etc. As well, maybe some of it is actually, collected and recycled. But, there's so much value that we lose there when all of the focus has been focused on this kind of front end of the economic activity, the resource extraction and production. So right now, that's a kind of linear economy. And when we look around, that's a lot about how the world's working at the moment. When we shift our mindset and kind of think from a circular perspective, I think the name always helps, this circular kind of thinking. It gives us, shift back of looking throughout that value chain of a product, of a business, of a service. And when we look at a city level of all of those flows going through it and thinking, well, how do we retain that value throughout? Particularly thinking about, waste and pollution that's caused there. So reducing waste and pollution, keeping those products and materials in use for as long as possible. And as well as that, kind of thinking, how do we actually regenerate the natural systems? Because the world can't actually continue if we continually pull from finite resources as well. So you have to think about regeneration around that. You mentioned donut economics. That also puts it into context. And I know we've got Akil here around Earth 51, who looks at a lot of the sustainable development goals as well. So then donut economics looks at how do we keep, within these planetary boundaries, particularly around resources, all these other elements, biodiversity that, we're causing to the planet, but actually improve people's, standards of living or retain them in this kind of enoughness levels. That's that inner part of the donut. And before I finish, I'll probably say finally, and I know this is a net zero focus as well around the Reading Climate Festival. A lot of net zero is really focusing on the metric of carbon. And when we look at products and the creation of stuff and taking resources, all of that involves carbon, production or embodied, and a lot of products have embodied carbon in them. So to either reduce the amount of carbon that we're producing or emitting and completely lower that, which net zero is really about completely lowering it and also regenerating some of it to put back some of the carbon emitted, then we really have to think about redesigning the way that we use our resources as well.
Cool. And what was the inspiration behind this concept? How did it come into being? Was it sort of just the fact that sort of in nature itself is cyclical? What was the inspiration behind the notion of the circular economy?
I think it's kind of been built up over time and many levels of wisdom and knowledge. I think when we look back, we can probably see that maybe our economy was more circular before it came more fast and throwaway and consumptive, and as well, when you looked at other indigenous cultures around the world, they're maybe actually still, living in a much more circular economy. And as you're saying, with nature, as well as that. I think in the 1970s, particularly from my area in design, a lot of some designers and academics really started looking at these kind of limits to growth, but also kind of economy of loops and actually looking at how, as designers, all this stuff going out in the world, if this really wasn't going to be great, and how would that be able to continue as well. So it's been built up over time. Myself, I was inspired when I read the book Cradle to Cradle in university. And as a designer, again, that opened up my mind of thinking, all of these products that businesses are putting out there, why are they not thinking about what happens then to them at the end of life? Why, when I'm designing stuff, is it not standard to think about how it's going to be repaired and its life going to last as long as possible, and what toxics are leaching out into the environment as well? And then of course Joe will probably pick up on this. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation has really kind of pioneered and brought a lot of that wisdom, to the forefront and pushed it also towards the business community to really kind of take it on as well.
Brilliant. So thank you very much for that, Erica. That kind of sort of puts it into perspective, puts a bit of colour into what we mean when we're thinking about the circular economy. I'm going to turn to Joe now. And Joe, you're at the forefront, if you like, of communicating with organisations around the world. Can you give us some examples of the circular economy in action? Perhaps some, who are the leaders in the field? And what have we learned as a result?
Yeah, well, it's interesting just hearing Erica talk about the progression of the idea or how it's developed in recent years. And if we'd been having this conversation maybe 10 years ago, we would have probably just been talking about photocopiers, which have been operating on a rental model in a B2B sense is quite common. And carpet tiles. It's felt like in the early days of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, there were a number of carpet companies like Interface and Desso who were speaking quite publicly and demonstrating what some of these new practices might be. Fortunately, now we're 10 years on and we've really seen this amazing wave of momentum behind the circular economy concept. There are many, many more examples to talk about. It almost seems like every week there are a number of new innovations from businesses, small and large, that are exciting and push this idea of a circular economy further. Some that I particularly like are IKEA on a number of fronts. Really, they have done an audit of all their 10,000 different products and identified which might be suitable for different types of loops or strategies. So it should be clear that the design approach that you'd apply to keep us for a light bulb in a circular economy would be very different to that which you'd apply for a sofa or a bed sheet. So they've categorized them into different ways and assessed them to try and create something of a roadmap to transforming all of those products to fit within a circular economy. I also really like a lot of the marketing that IKEA put out there. So they had this famous advert a few years ago by the director Spike Jonze, which showed a lamp, which was personified over the course of the advert and then left out on the street in the rain, and someone came along and said, "Lamps don't have feelings, chuck out your old lamp, you don't need that anymore, go and get a new one." And they picked up that story a couple of years ago and made a sort of sequel and said, you know what, lamps can have a second life. They can be repaired, they can be kept in use for longer. So I think with IKEA, there's a nice sort of embrace of change, of becoming a different type of company, which I find quite exciting. They've also released a circular design guide where you can assess your furniture for how well it's designed for a circular economy, or if you're a furniture designer or a product designer, you can use that as a creative stimulus. Others that spring to mind, Adidas, who have created the Futurecraft Loop shoe, which is one of a number of things they've done. But this running shoe, which looks like any other running shoe, is just made of one polymer, one plastic. So it could be cycled without a loss of quality. So if you look at your standard pair of trainers, I don't know how many different types of plastic and different fabrics are in there, but probably quite a few, which means that when it's recycled, it really loses quality. I'm sure Vivek would be able to speak to this concept much more eloquently than I could. But the Futurecraft Loop is about saying, well, let's just use one material and see if we can cycle that without a loss of quality. They're also doing other things like something called infinite play, where you can send. They make the reverse, the selling of used goods as easy as buying new ones. So not listing things as an auction on eBay, but ticking in an app, ticking things you want to sell, and a box coming to your house where you put your goods in, send them off, and they can be sorted and either reused or recycled appropriately. In packaging, there's loads of stuff going on. Notpla, the edible water blobs, so eliminating packaging altogether, creating a type of packaging that can never become waste. And then things like Club Zero and Loop, really trying to make reusable packaging, take a lot of the friction out of that. Things like washing, distribution, standardization, those are things that make reusable packaging quite challenging. So, but there are a number of companies trying to take that on. And there's platforms like Grover, doing tech rental really well and really pushing this as a more convenient option, and keeping, rather than our tech being stuck in cupboards doing nothing, keeping it in circulation. And then on food, there's some amazing stuff going on. There's a company called Zenbi, they're a part of Mizkan, a Japanese company, who they're making pasta out of diverse ingredients, so not just relying on wheat, but making it out of other sources, and also making edible food products from the bits of food that we usually chuck away, like the center of a corn on the cob. Food is an area where there's a lot of inventiveness going on. I think, just to finish, the thing that we learn from all of these is, firstly, that the circular economy is an opportunity. It's a creative opportunity. It's an innovation opportunity. And secondly, it's also an economic opportunity as well. If you think that in many industries, 80% of the stuff that we create every year ends up as waste, that tracks for pretty much for plastic packaging, fashion, food, and we know that waste is chronically high. So there is an economic opportunity in there if we can tap into it. And then lastly, it shows that designing for a circular economy isn't just one size fits all. There are many different strategies that you could bring in. Sometimes people seem to think that circular economy is just about a bit better recycling, or making everything durable, or renting everything rather than buying it. It is those things, but it's about finding solutions that are fit for context rather than just doing a cookie cutter across the economy. So in that sense, it's a creative challenge, and one that we see lots of designers and companies embracing.
Brilliant. I mean, it's good to listening to you as you were going through that. It's great to see some of those examples. And yet, when I go into my Sainsbury's shop, the store, or when I get the delivery, or if I look at my waste that I generate at home, the biggest one is the probably the food packaging.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a ways to go in terms of the big grocery retailers in the UK, for example.
Yeah.
Are they on top of this? Are they thinking about this at all?
So much, honestly. I think you'd be surprised. If you just look at Tesco, for example, they recently started piloting Loop, this concept called Loop, where I think there's 80 or 90 brands where you can get where they've bought into this concept where you can get reusable packaging. People say it's like the milkman model, but for Tropicana orange juice and Haagen-Dazs ice cream, and it enables they take care of the washing and refilling of those packages, so it enables reusable packaging. But then I think there's quieter ones that maybe pass us by. You may have noticed in more supermarkets now, the shrink wrap around 4 tins of beans has been eliminated. It's the sort of thing we kind of take for granted because it's quite subtle, but sometimes it is as easy as that. When you buy a pot of double cream now, is less likely in many supermarkets to have that secondary lid on top, because someone's looked at it and said, do we really need that? That's just going to be a piece of plastic waste. So that some of these things are flying under the radar, but yes, the supermarkets are actively thinking about it. We'd always want progress to be faster, but it's on the radar for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. So now to Vivek. I mean, Vivek, you're an entrepreneur and a serial one at that. So how have you put these principles into practice in your businesses, and what are the real world sort of challenges in doing that?
So I think the two previous speakers, so Joe talked very much about creative challenge, a really good one. And, Erica talked about manufacturing, landfill and waste. So I think the first concept that we had to come up with almost 15, 20 years ago was really trying to get people away from thinking about it as waste. And that's one of the key problems I think this whole industry had. People have always conceptualized, as Erica said, a linear process. So when you finish using it, it's waste and you get rid of it. And so there was very little design, engineering, R&D and technology that was actually implemented into looking at it not as waste, but as a feedstock. And once you start to mentally mind shift away from it being waste, you start to then apply technology as to how do you treat it as a supply chain feedstock of high value. Once you do that, you start to develop the technology. And I'll give you just 3 quick examples of some technology. So, for example, we had a company that did, in the early days, we did lithium-ion battery recycling. And everybody in those days thought, well, that's crazy, because lithium-ion battery recycling is for just the little tiny watches you have. Of course, today, it's a big thing. But, from that, you create, silicon, you create lithium, you create magnesium, you create, cobalt, you create, carbonate lithium and zinc. So, what I have in here in my hand is essentially what I call a mine above ground, right? Instead of digging up the earth and extracting the valuables from the thing, you can look around your room, and everything around your room is essentially, when the right mindset is applied to it and the right technology applied to it, is effectively a valuable resource and not a waste. Another example of that would be the company I'm currently with. So, people demonize plastic, and they should. And both Joe is right and Erica's right. You should use less where you don't need to use it. But at the same time, necessarily demonizing plastic would have been very similar to demonizing aluminium many, many years ago. And aluminium is a great example of a circular economy, because 75 to 80% of aluminium today is recycled aluminium, and only 20% is virgin. Why? Because companies developed a technology, Alcan specific, developed a technology to recycle aluminium. Well, you can do the same thing today. You can take a plastic PET bottle, which, this is just a cut up one, and you can convert it back into an ester. And an ester is your base building block to make anything PET polyester. So again, going back to what Joe mentioned, and maybe I shouldn't show shoes on the thing, because mine is very, very old, but this is the shoe that Joe was mentioning very quickly, which is effectively, an Adidas shoe made from polyester. And polyester is essentially ester converted back into yarn and then made into products, which you wear. But you could equally make this into bottles or packaging or film or, the cling film that was mentioned, bullpen. So when you start to apply technology to so-called, inverted commas, unwanted or finished use products, you can get back into your raw grade material and create effectively products that have equal quality to your traditional virgin material. And then, you have now, thanks to the likes of a lot of the companies out there, big brands, as you mentioned, Adidas again. Thank you for that, Joe. Appreciate that lead in there. But yeah, you got the Adidas t-shirt, again, made from 100% recycled, right? This is made from 100% plastic bottles, as with the shoes. And yeah, that's, I think that's one of the examples, as I said to you, on what we're doing today with regards to putting the principles into practice.
Brilliant. And a couple of questions kind of come to mind. One is around the cost of extraction. And clearly there is a mind shift, as you said, that's involved. Assuming you've made the mind shift, is extraction always feasible? Secondly, is it what is the cost equation there? And the other thing is, doesn't it kind of presume some sort of recycling infrastructure?
Yeah, very, very good. All good questions. So, okay, well, there's 3 or 4 there. Let me try and deal with them one at a time. So in terms of the cost and the production, I would have to say 15, 20 years ago, yes, it was a real challenge, right? It was a tremendous challenge, again, because of 2 things. One, what people don't understand in this area is, it takes a long, long time to develop a technology and to commercialize it. First of all, you've got to develop that technology just in terms of the inventive nature, the development and the R&D. Once you get it to that stage, you then get it into the pilot plant, and you've got to prove it on a pilot plant stage. Then comes the real challenge. And the real challenge is then moving it from a pilot to a large scale commercial plant, which when you're developing these kind of plants and technologies, it's not a short process. I mean, this, to go and produce those bottles into this and then into that, even when you have the technology and it works, it's 18 months to 24 months to get the licenses, the permits. These are big, big manufacturing plants. They sit over, 12 to 15 acres of land, right? So it's not a small investment. It's not a small leap of faith. not a small belief. Once you've overcome that, the original challenge, I would say, 10, 15 years ago, was then trying to convince a customer to buy it. And the perception when you started down this market was always, oh, recycled products, it's inferior quality. And that's because for many, many, many years, that is correct. People would downcycle and not recycle. So again, this comes back to the mind shift. You have to mind shift people away from this waste, because when you think about waste, you then start thinking about making it less toxic as opposed to highly valuable. And fortunately, because of all the speakers here and all the group that everybody promotes here, now these big brands, as mentioned, the IKEAs, the Adidas, the North Faces, they embrace this technology because they understand that the quality is the same. So when you come back to the cost equation, if you can buy this product at exactly the same cost and the same quality and make the same product and same quality, why wouldn't you do it, right? And so one of the things that you'll see in Perpetual is, to be honest with you, if you look at our website stuff, we talk less and less about the environment. We actually don't talk about that. We talk about same product, same quality, same cost. Oh, and by the way, it's sustainable, right? And then it becomes a no-brainer. Yeah. Okay, now you talked about collection and supply. Again, I think that's partly a myth, because when you're creating a product that has value, then I am willing to pay $450 per ton of plastic bottles. And again, you stop looking at it as waste because it's valuable. So the moment you put a price that you're willing to pay somebody for it, it becomes valuable, and then it's collected. So, we recycle about 3 million plastic bottles a day. We collect it within about 110 kilometer radius of our farm. Okay. And by the way, you might think 3.5 million bottles a day is a lot, but actually in London alone, we need 6 plants just to recycle what London produces in a day. Okay. So I think, again, it's a mind shift change, and it's everything in life. And that's why it takes 20, 30 years of generational change to get that mind shift. But once you've got that mind shift, I think things fall into place.
Brilliant. That's excellent. Thank you very much, Vivek, for that, for those insights. So now to Akhil. Akhil, from your perspective, how important is this concept of the circular economy in achieving net zero already? In our backyard. And if I'm a sort of Reading business, what should I be doing? How can I make a start?
Yeah, I just want to call out, totally ad-lib, that I was enjoying Vivek's conversation so much. Wanted to step off the panel and just sit down and keep listening to it. That was amazing. Fantastic. He's learning so much, including the fact that Gurpreet used shop at Sainsbury's. That's something. No, jokes aside, I think, Vivek, the work that you're doing, phenomenal, taking nothing away from the other panelists, including myself, but it's great to see circularity in action on a panel. That's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So thank you for sharing that. Coming back to where do we start? I think I'm one of the least, how do I say it, carbon-focused people on this panel today in terms of the work that we do, because it's just that we do something, we're more holistic in terms of how we approach this. So I almost feel when we speak to clients that the conversation about what should we do is second, because we're almost tackling a cultural problem initially, where all these solutions that are being rolled out are something that businesses get to once they're believers. And I think we still need to get to that stage of educating clients enough to say that, look, I need to start changing the way we're running our business. It's not their fault. I love the way Vivek says you don't demonize plastic. Same way you don't demonize carbon. We need carbon to survive. We won't be on our planet otherwise. I think just the way we use it, the fact that we just smoke it up without having any consideration of the consequences is a huge problem. So I feel that we should also try and understand the impacts and the consequences of action. So it all boils down to the education piece. We find that with clients, once we're able to establish a cultural and a mindset shift, things start to flow. And then they're like, hey, what else can I do in this space? How do I use regenerated nylon for my t-shirts or whatever it is. They start to look at their supply chains and value chains. But there are steps before that, and that's where we get not stuck, but that's the hurdle to cross. So cultural shifts. And I think that's where businesses can start to look internally. The biggest challenge they have internally is money. Everyone says, this is going to cost me more. Should I really be looking at it? And I think that's where we're constantly harping on about the fact, not the moral argument on why you got to be better, but the fact that actually if you change, you can make a lot more money down this route. And actually, if you don't change, you're going to start losing a lot of money every year down this route. So we focus on the financial outcomes of reducing, making sure customers want to gravitate to you. Customers view you as suppliers. They want to make sure you're more ethical, you're more trusted, you're doing more across your supply chain, you're not marginalizing workers, you're not using children to code for you at 14 years old sitting in India, writing software program, or women just being marginalized to stitch t-shirts, whereas men are the management cadre. So things like that you want to be very careful of. And we see that in RFPs and sales exercises coming through where they're constantly being asked, suppliers are being asked questions on what are you doing with, what's your child labor policy, or what's your anti-slavery policy? And this is asking questions of companies that don't have supply chains. So I think there's businesses, without spreading any fear or uncertainty and doubt in the space, I think if they don't change and they don't start to toe this line of adopting a sustainable model, I'll say sustainable first, then I'll come into circularity, because I think there are two sides to this. And I'd say if they don't follow that, they are done. In 2 years from now, they're done. And 2 years is not a long time. Say 3 years, the next 1,000 days, they're done. There's so much of pressure and public and consumer sentiment, and we call it the consumerization of sustainability coming through the ranks. They better be starting to take this quite seriously. And this is not us talking, this is us seeing other clients doing this particular piece. And coming back to, sorry, I've gone all over the place. I just realized I was so excited about Vivek's conversation. But I feel that number one, businesses have to transform or you're not going to survive this for sure. This is the largest inflection point in our history. Businesses find that tough because they've had 200 years of industrialization and chasing money. Well, keep chasing money, but put some of that into society. And the circular economy is obviously a massive area when it comes to achieving our net zero targets. But I do feel that you got to look wider. So the circular piece was beautifully narrated by Erica, but I think there has to be more to it. There's a social element to it. What about inequalities? Some of us on this call today come from emerging markets. I was born in an emerging market as well, where circularity is threaded into our DNA. It doesn't change things. You got to look at inequalities. You got to look at poverty and education. And why am I paying women less when I should be paying them the same as men? 50% of this planet is made up of women, yet only 20% of them are being pulled into technology jobs, for instance. How do we change that disparity? You have to look at this as what we call systems change rather than circular economy delivers net zero. Won't happen. It has to be a case of this is definitely going to fix the problem when you talk about carbon emissions. This is also got to be looked at in its entirety. So how do we become a better business? Trusted, valued, but more than that, how do we remove income disparities, inequalities, gender inequities? How do we educate more people? How do we use our influence to become better businesses? And yes, in all of that, product development, just make sure that you're developing products and designing them, thinking of the post-consumer phase. So that, I love the words that Vivek used, so that the value can be pulled back into the value chain. That's why it's called value chain. It's not waste, it's value at the end. And I love that thinking. And I think that's important but you need to start doing that as a business once you believe that you need to do it. That belief comes from that mindset shift. So, sorry, I'm harping on about the mindset shift, but I almost feel that that's step one. And then step two is, okay, how do we get this done? And then you've got all these wonderful ideas. So I feel that if you're a business in Reading, drive that mindset shift, educate your people. This is going to make you more money. Financial outcomes, you're going to be benefiting from this. And at the end of the day, there's a plethora of ways, depending on your business, on how you can drive your business forward.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Okay, I mean, it sounds to me, listening to you, that people don't have a choice. They have to do this. Was it 3,000 days?
People say 3 years, but that's 1,000. It's not a long time.
Yeah, it's not a long time. Thank you very much for that. And I hope, organisations and businesses take that on board. Certainly agree with that. Peter, from your perspective, now turning to Peter. So Peter, head of climate strategy, Reading Borough Council. From your perspective, what are the kind of levers and sort of policy options, perhaps that Reading Borough Council you have, in terms of encouraging these ideas locally amongst local businesses? And from your perspective, we have a climate emergency. We've got a target for net zero for Reading by 2030. How important is the concept of circular economy for us, and how can you encourage it?
Thanks, Gurpreet. Perhaps I could start by just saying I'm daunted by the enthusiasm and knowledge of our previous speakers, and so I'm trying not to kill the mood here by being the man from the council. But I think I'll try and answer that question, Gurpreet, first of all, if I may, with a quote. Cities and urban policymakers play a pivotal role in accelerating the circular economy and realising its socio-economic potential. So those aren't my words. Those are the conclusions of a report by the social enterprise Circular Economy, which people may have come across, which looked at the role of local government across 43 European cities. And that went on to say that local government programmes that encourage recycling, repair, circular design, they result in real tangible social and economic as well as environmental benefits for the city and its people. New investment, job creation in the green economy, just to give a couple of examples. So I think, as our previous speaker so eloquently put it, there's a business case for the circular economy there, not just the moral imperative. And for those reasons, I think circular economy features very prominently in our new Reading Climate Emergency Strategy, which we adopted and launched back in November of last year. I was involved in putting that together with colleagues across in an organisation called Reading Climate Change Partnership, which is the sort of curator of the festival of which this event is a part, and colleagues on the call from who've been active in the Circular Economy Club. So we've nailed our colours firmly to the circular economy mast. And now we're obviously in the process of working out what that means in practice. So just preparing for this, I thought, well, have we got a good example within the council of what we're doing to put that into practice? And I suppose food waste sprung to mind. So, Reading was a little bit slow to the party with food waste collections, but we've got there. We've rolled it out over the last 12 months. And as a result, we've successfully boosted our recycling rate from 32% in April 2020 to 52% in April 2021. So, great news for the taxpayers because we're paying less landfill tax. And great news for the climate because of all that methane we're avoiding. But it doesn't stop there, does it? I mean, in an ideal world, I've got to acknowledge we would not be collecting that much food waste from our residents. So there's an ongoing programme of work with them and with retailers and the supply chain to get that down. But at the moment, it's a reality and we've got to deal with it. And it also provides an opportunity to drive forward circular economy principles. So that food waste now goes off to an anaerobic digester, which generates electricity, which goes into the national grid. On 10th of September this year, we took delivery of our first of what will be, within a few years, a whole fleet of electric refuse trucks, powered, albeit indirectly, through the electricity that's being generated now from that food waste. So that's the story that we're able now to tell to our residents. So I guess, like many circles in the circular economy, it's not a perfect circle, but I hope you'd agree that's quite a good example of that in practice. And if we can develop that and deliver our zero carbon depot concept and sort out sort of tricky stuff around vehicle to grid charging, we'll be harvesting solar power from new canopies we're putting in the car park of our depot by day, storing that in batteries so that we can charge the trucks overnight, and using that vehicle to grid technology for the truck batteries to power the depot buildings during the late afternoon peak when they've finished their rounds. So a slightly different and overlapping circle to the one that I described with the electricity generation. Our main challenge now is getting people to drive those trucks. So if anybody's got an HGV license, plenty of jobs going, an excellent employer, Reading Borough Council, check out the job section of our website because we just can't get the drivers. But on a serious note, I think probably important to say that there are limits to the council's influence. We're often credited with more influence than we have. So we don't ultimately have control over consumption by the residents, and we don't also have control over the requirements of the reprocessors at the other end. So we're in the middle of that supply chain. That's not a complaint, just an objective sort of recognition of the limits of our agency, I guess. But we are working very hard on quality, so that we can start to bridge that gap between what the residents give us and what the reprocessors want. And there's a really important role for local government there, which, if we get that right, obviously does help with the sort of questions that Vivek was raising, and improves the economics of the circular economy, to make it much more likely that more things will end up in that rather than in the take make waste model. So just to sum up, looking ahead, we're refreshing our sort of waste strategies and waiting with bated breath for the outcome of various consultations on the Environment Bill, which will make their way into the Environment Act when it becomes an act later this year. And we're expecting that to give us stronger statutory drivers on deposit return schemes for plastic bottles, glass and cans and tins, more on extended producer responsibility, and more on consistency of collections between local authorities. I think all of that should increase the incentives and the economics of developing circular economy models. So, councils absolutely have a role, but it's not just about what the council does. And the Environment Bill that I've just mentioned will have implications for businesses too. We expect they'll be, put under some of the similar requirements that we're facing on recycling. So that's a challenge for the wider business community, which probably allows me to close on a very quick plug for the council's commercial trade waste services. Give us a ring if you think we can help. Because we're thinking about this stuff all the time, and we just might be able to help, but we'd certainly be keen to have the conversation with you if you're a business that's scratching its head about compliance with some of those emerging regulations which are raising the bar and pushing the circular economy forward all the time, which I think we have to agree is a good thing.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Peter. I've got a bunch of questions, but I want to open up. To the audience for their questions. So, if you, let me turn to Catherine, my co-host, who's been diligently looking at the chat window. Catherine, do we have some questions from there?
Well, yes, we have got Ali Bauna. Ali, would you like to ask your question yourself? Can you let me know who you would like to ask as well, if possible?
Hello, and thank you for letting me to ask my question, and thanks for your great time and wonderful job. Thanks, appreciate this sincerely. My question just about because I saw Joe explain some great products about the nature-friendly products. So, such as some companies, such as Nike or some other companies, try to respect more to the nature resources. So they produce more friendly products with environment. And the concern is, comes up. One is losing customer satisfaction, and the second maybe is a bigger concern or issues about the nature resources. I would appreciate if Joe explain more information about that. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Good questions. I mean, I think Vivek picked up on this as well. I think that the perception and the performance of products made from natural resources, like with recycled resources as well, has changed massively, and the performance of products made with natural resources is exceptional in many fronts at the moment. I think there is still a long way to go. We can't currently have biological materials that can perform some of the same properties as the materials in our electronics, for example. There are still some barriers, but there are some amazing progress being made. And I think, again, it is an innovation opportunity. So if we could tap into some of the same material streams that we find in the natural world and use technology and design to unlock new performance capabilities for those materials, then we can actually address a lot of our materials concerns. And I'll give an example. The amount of cellulosic fibers, so natural fibers produced every year from things like forests and food waste, crops and so on, the amount of cellulose produced every year massively is far greater than all of the plastic we've ever produced since the dawn of time. So there's an abundant materials opportunity from all the materials that grow and surround us in the natural world. So if we could tap into that rather than just relying on a small palette of materials that are derived from fossil fuels, then we could actually have a much more diverse range of materials to choose from that are fit for a circular economy. They could feed back into that cycle. And actually, my hope is that we could take the pressure off some of the current resources that are under immense strain. So actually, I hope that by improving our understanding of material science and finding new applications for both natural and regenerated materials, actually we could take pressure off some of the materials on which we depend and are a breaking point, like those derived from fossil fuels or cotton that comes from really intensive agricultural practices.
I'm quite interested because I think the question that Ali asked originally, he was talking about things like clothing, and I'm thinking about T-shirts, I think you mentioned, Ali, which makes me think about Vivek and your fabric that you produce using PET. I'm really interested, what are the balances between using something like natural cellulose that you mentioned, Joe, which I think you can make into various different fabrics, can't you? The balance of that against using PET bottles to produce fabrics, to produce something which then loops back into a circular economy, the materials which could otherwise be wasted. What are the balances between those two?
Yeah.
Vivek, can you come in and talk a bit about that? Because I think it'd be great to hear from you.
Sure. So I think, first of all, I think Joe answered Ali's question really, really well, actually, and drew up a lot of concepts. So coming back to what you said, let me just give again two really real examples of life. So first of all, today, Perpetual could take plastic bottles and convert them to clothing, and we can also take plastic bottles and convert them back into bottles and packaging. We also have a R&D development currently underway where we've taken 100% polyester T-shirts and converted those T-shirts back into yarn and back into T-shirts. So we are already at the stage where we can do that at pilot scale. We can already also convert the T-shirts back into ester, and we're not at that stage yet, but the intention is in the next 2-3 years to be able to convert those back into bottles as well, because of the base material. So, again, coming back to what Joe said, and, and we have some other physicists in engineering, I do believe, being a physicist as well, you have to really put technology and invest technology development in R&D to make these breakthroughs. It's not a case of just replacing one product with another product and doing it simply. So we are there. We're probably, at least another 5-6 years away before there's full scale and before you can start to create new business models, for example. So, Ali mentioned Nike. So, I'm sure these big brand companies will come up with new ideas where they'll say, maybe, for example, instead of buying this T-shirt for £35, you buy it for £50, and at the end of its life, you send the T-shirt back with a £3 check, and they give you a new T-shirt, and they recycle it, right? So maybe coming back to what Joe was saying about the rental model of photocopiers 20 years ago, maybe that becomes the new model again, and you get the circular route around where you don't own your T-shirt anymore, you rent it, right? And you finish it, you send it back, and you get a new one. When a football company finishes its design and changes its new design in Manchester United or whatever, next year you send them back that £80 T-shirt with a £5 note, they reprint and they send it back to you, right? So I think this will start to happen. And even just from a conceptualized basis, okay, now, we start getting the realms of Star Wars, but I don't see why I can't take my original pilot plant, which was small, which is not economical, But why can't I take that pilot plant now and shrink it into a large photocopying machine so that people at home can put their plastic bottles in immediately at their house and convert the ester and then 3D print it? Because 3D printers are PET plastic lead. So, this kind of thought process, will that happen? Yes, I genuinely believe it will, 10, 15 years down the line. Now, where do we go wrong? We go wrong when we just try to replace one product which is so good with another product, right? So, for example, let me give you a real example. One of the things that made me cry 10, 15 years ago was, when they had films like Madagascar come out and they showed all these beautiful animals to all the kids in this wonderful Disney world. Yet the reality was Madagascar was actually changed and converted into huge production of sisal to so-called replace plastic bags with sisal bags, because sisal was considered more environmentally friendly. And in respect of that, destroying huge forests in Madagascar, so there are actually no more animals there, right? And, the same thing comes back to, when you go to certain brands now, I cry every time I pick up a wooden spoon or a wooden fork, because, recycling plastic, again, is really easy. Plastic is a really simple, clean product. It's easy to wash, clean, recycle, and convert it back into a product. Spoons is a whole different ballgame, and wood is a whole different ballgame. So, it comes back to what everybody's saying here. I think as the industry moves on, we spent 30, 40, 50 years developing great materials. We shouldn't just discard those great materials and try to replace them with new ones because they're perceived environmental. It is about taking those great materials, applying technology to recycle them, and thinking ahead of the game, right? So it's about thinking today, how are we going to recycle solar panels in 20 years from now? Because it's going to take us 12 to 15 years to get there. It's too late in 20 years from now to say that solar panels are being dumped in Africa and dumped here and dumped in the rest of the world. We've got to start now. Yeah. Same thing with car batteries, with lithium car batteries. It annoys me every time we see, a $100,000 Tesla on the road, or £100,000 Tesla on the road, and, Tesla's not paying a tax of £10,000 to get rid of those batteries. They should be. They absolutely should be charged at council level and government level for bringing those batteries into the country and to deal with it at the end of its life. That's how we really need to push this thinking, I feel.
Yeah,
sorry,
really
I talked way too long. I apologize.
No, that's good. We've got time, so that's fine. It was really interesting what you said. I think my question wasn't very clear either, but I think the answer is that there is no single solution, and it does need to be a mix, doesn't it? We need to look at a mix of materials and just taking that circular approach to all of them, because wood is not necessarily as circular as plastic. So
absolutely, yeah,
I think that's really important to consider. So yeah, thank you very much for that, Vivek. That was really helpful. Has anyone else in the audience got any other questions? So we've only had the one question entered into the chat from Ali, but has anybody else got anything they would like to ask? You can feel free just to speak up. You can put your hand up if you want, or just unmute yourself and ask straight away, whatever would work best for you. In the meantime, can I ask, have any of the panelists got any questions for each other? So we're not sitting here quietly waiting for people to ask questions.
Hello.
Oh, hi. Is that Peter?
Yes, please. This is Peter. About the circular economy, I learned businesses, almost every business prioritize profits, and the circular economy seems to limit production. That's how I see it. So is it a win-win for the environment and then businesses, the circular economy?
You said circular economy, it seems to limit production, Peter.
Yeah, but because most businesses, production of probably goods will not be like...
Probably
effective.
Ultimately it may limit production if items live longer, but I think the whole thing with circularity is that it just doesn't have the end of life, so possibly it will limit the sort of like the fast fashion industry.
Sure.
Hopefully production isn't necessarily limited. Can we put that to Joe, because I think you've got a good overview, Joe. Would you be able to come back on that?
Yeah, I mean, I saw Peter's question in the chat as well, and I think circular economy will mean over time, yes, there may be some reduction in the creation of new items. I think that ultimately has to be a good thing, because we can't keep making everything from scratch to meet everyone's needs. I think it's not really feasible. But for the foreseeable future, there is obviously still parts of the world and still millions of people who want and need access to many of the same to things to make their lives better, and that they certainly shouldn't. So the economy is still growing in that sense, and we will still need new things. The circular economy is not some nirvana where nothing is ever created or destroyed. That we still need to produce things. I think the really interesting bit comes when companies start to find a way to make profit, but to decouple that from resource consumption. So we've spoken a bit about rental. That's a good example of, so if I maintain ownership of a product, and it's a high quality product, it's designed to be repaired and refurbished, and I can rent that to 20 different customers and keep it in use for longer, rather than selling it to one customer, waving goodbye to them when they leave the shop and hoping I see them again one day. That's a very different model. When actually, if the product design is right and the business model is right, it could be a huge competitive advantage for companies to operate in that way, because they're not continually dependent on buying more resources in order to create the next product. So I think that there's definitely business opportunities in here, and we've produced 25 reports over the past 10 years, which show that this is a multi-trillion-dollar economic opportunity. Yes, it takes a bit of thinking to unlock it, and you may need a different mindset, which as many speakers have spoken about tonight. But it certainly is an economic opportunity as well as an environmental and social one.
Catherine, if none of the other speakers want to add on to that, I would love to add on to that. I don't know if the other speakers want to add. I feel I've talked enough. Otherwise, I'd love to add on to that.
Yeah, please do, yes.
Okay, I just didn't want to dominate, but I think, Peter, it's also, again, there's two things again. If you look at it from a production and manufacturing perspective, so you mentioned very specifically, just take back into plastic and PET, just for an example. PET or ester comes effectively from oil. So it's an oil-derived product. So it starts from your crude oil and it works down and you get two chemical materials, PTA and MEG, which then when you mix, get an ester. So when you're an industry in the PET or plastic recycling, you are controlled and dominated by oil and the production cost of oil. And so when you are running a business on that, as we all know, oil is varied and fluctuated from $40 to $120, back down to $40, and now back up to $60. And you're a production company making margins of 8 to 10%, with the major control being these big oil exploration companies and defined on the price by OPEC in some political cloud at the back, which is non-realistic on the real production cost, right? If you start to think about it as a manufacturer and you can replace that oil chemicals by ester coming from recycled plastic bottles, which are diversified and localized to the local area, the local environment, and the local community, you are no longer reliant on that fluctuation that oil goes through. You are able to control your source feedstock much, much more closely with the local community and the local environment and the local businesses. So you start to bring things away from this, in all honesty, dominance and control by global corporations, and bring it back to the local communities, the local buyers, the local people. And it's a whole new business model again. And it works. And to give you an idea on why that can work, to be honest with you, we have to change the way we live in life, right? Because you are correct. Profits have driven the corporations. And it's not just about profits. Profit should be replaced with the word exploitation. because it's exploitation of the resources, exploitation of the land, exploitation of the environment, and most importantly, exploitation of the labor force. If you do not exploit these 3 or 4 things today, it's very difficult to create a company with profit. So one has to change the whole mindset of the whole way the businesses are run today in terms of businesses of the future. And I believe very passionately, you are seeing that in this younger generation. The people you interview for jobs today in 2020 and 2021, and the people you interviewed for jobs in 2005 and 2004 have a really different passion. And the mindset of the type of profits that you want to create in a company mean that the first questions a lot of new graduates ask you is, not in such a direct way, but their concept in them, that if you read between the lines, they are trying to understand if they're working for an ethical company. And an ethical company in their head means, not exploiting these things and finding a different way to do it. So I hear you. And I think your question is right. And I think those companies that just focus on profit deserve to be punished.
Thanks very much, Vivek. That was a good extra. Thank you very much for adding
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Can I just come to Tia now? Have you still got a question, Tia? You had your hand up and I put you next in our order. Are you still up for asking something? It's Tia Evans.
Yes, I am. Yeah, I have a question for Vivek, but I suppose it's more of a comment, and it'd be great to kind of get his input on that. While she was speaking, we're talking obviously in terms of plastic and creating, obviously, processes and, to recycle plastic a lot better and keeping it in the cycle. But then would it not be more beneficial for industries? Because if we're talking about, organizations, it could be a bottom line profit, right? Profit making, and that will still be, a general theme, even though we are moving in this sustainability direction. I think I do believe that we're still very far from that, by looking at what we are seeing in the industry and what's happening still. So I'm saying, my thought is, would it not then be beneficial to start thinking about the innovate as well? Because it seems it seems to be this conversation of either or, right? Either we are recycling plastic or we are eliminating plastic altogether, and thinking of alternatives. So I'm drawing on some points, for example, with biomimicry, which exists within the circular industry, with grapes, for example, being used for other alternatives for packaging, right? And there are other different kind of what's called ideas that have been generated out there, where they are using things that already exist within those different markets. So if you're working with grapes, for example, and this whole idea of packaging with grapes exists, then that could be something that you kind of embed into your process, right? So I think it might be more beneficial for industries to kind of innovate in that sense, or kind of look at all these new ideas that are popping up and how they can bring it into their own organization and use that. So I just wanted to know what do you think about that idea, or how would that go in the long term? I hope that was clear.
The line wasn't particularly clear, Tia. I didn't hear everything. Have any of the panelists got an answer that they're burning to give to that?
I don't think we really understood the question.
Maybe sorry.
Maybe he could type it into the chat.
Tia, can I ask you to type it in, please, into the chat? I know you mentioned biomimicry, which I think that Erica might have found interesting. I don't know if you might like to talk a little bit about biomimicry, Erica, while Peter types something in. Tia types something in.
Yeah, I suppose biomimicry, maybe if those who haven't heard the term before, is this idea of kind of looking to nature for its design and inspiration. Nature's been doing things for billions of years. We're quite a young species, so we're kind of learning and mucking up things actually quite a bit along the way. So when we look at maybe nature's processes, the way that they do things, actually there's a lot to learn there that potentially, and going back to the circular economy, and one of the principles about regeneration is nature often kind of regenerates, and one part of nature maybe feeds into another, and figuring out as human species, or maybe some of the stuff that we make how does that actually really act as a nutrient to another part of the system rather than a pollutant or other areas around there. So a bit of I don't know if that linked in at all to the question.
I'm not
Put a bit on the
sure
biomimicry area there, but a huge inspiration, I think, more and more. And if we look at our economy, was very much built on a very logic-driven, mechanical system. And I think right now there's a bit of a realization that we've kind of disconnected humans and nature, whether we are part of nature, and maybe going deeper into the circular economy. And some of the thinking is really redesigning the system to be much more attuned and recognizing, that connection needs to happen again, both on, a planetary climate crisis level, but also in a health and well-being aspect as well.
I think that's a great summary, Erica.
Sorry, Catherine. We've just noticed there's another question in there.
No, I've got I'm waiting. I've got some lined up. So next I was actually going to come to Linda, who was asking about what's going on in Reading, which I was also going to pose to Erica.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I moved to Reading about 5 or 6 years ago, and kind of when I move somewhere, I'm like, what's going on in sustainability, circular, all of this kind of perspective. And what I found was really amazing, because there's a lot going on, but quite a lot grassroots, quite a lot community, and quite a lot of voluntary things as well, which I think is an interesting aspect about how do we value other types of work, and pay for some of these things that actually are extremely important and add so much to the community.
Yeah.
A few examples are the Repair Cafe. I was there at the weekend. So that's a community organization where people who know how to fix things, know how to sew, know how to pull apart tech and resolder bits and replace batteries and all of these things, will do that for you and help, think about how we can fix things as well, when maybe the manufacturer hasn't really helped or even designed that into it. So again, a grassroots kind of thing there. The bike kitchen, similar, supporting people to be able to fix and repair their bikes as well and upskill. So again, I think that links with Akio, the importance of the jobs and the things that are actually needed in their economy. Of course, there's loads of other businesses, and I suppose the more you look around, you'll be like, oh, that's a phone repair shop. That's go somewhere that I'm not very good with the sewing machine, so repairing clothes as well. So there's all of those types of businesses that we don't often really value as much as they should, and actually that's where we need to kind of shift more jobs into all of these other parts of the economy of enabling our stuff to last longer. Of course, what came out actually during the COVID and the pandemic and lockdown was the importance of closer and local circular loops, particularly around food. I think everyone discovered local markets, local growers, started growing themselves, and the community food growing groups. I mean, that's a really essential really part or a shift of thinking around our food systems, is how can we shift back to, rather than importing from the other side of the world, grow more here locally and seasonally as well. So there's quite a few things there. And I suppose we do have some of the really big tech businesses around who are apparently doing things around, improving their packaging, improving their the design of some of their technology and things like that. Of course, with the council, we've got brilliant RE3 who are also pretty engaged in increasing amounts of the things that we can recycle, and also engaging more with the community. I saw yesterday.
Sorry, Erica. Sorry, Karen. I was just going to say, can I pause you, because Peter's actually typed into the chat. Can he respond to this one as well? And you were just neatly segueing into that. But do you want to finish off what you were saying?
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I saw yesterday that they've partnered with a startup, or Recycle which is one of the first AI recycling things in the country, to be able to distribute the things, which there's similar technology with a food waste startup as well. So things happening, but I think there needs to be potentially more support and funding to a lot of the kind of community and the voluntary groups that are actually distributing and moving a lot of stuff for free. I use Freegal and Olio and these kind of things as well.
Yeah. Sorry, Peter, can I come to you and ask if you've got anything to add on to what Erica said?
No, I think Erica's nailed it. There was just to say on the question of what's happening in Reading, there's a theme on resources within the Reading Climate Emergency Strategy, and that gives a little flavour of things that have happened and the things that are planned in this area. So worth checking that out if you want to find out a bit more, and it gives some pointers to who to engage with. Absolutely. If you want to. But I think that point that Erica's made is critical. It also describes a bunch of stuff that's happening, which delivers a circularity, but is perhaps off the books, if you like, of the circular economy. So it's not just about the things that we can make market opportunities out of. It's the stuff that's happening at community level that is fantastic, of which there is no shortage in Reading. That's every bit as important as the things we end up measuring and being able to sort of, if you like, calculate or monetize in the context of a circular economy conversation.
It is very interesting, isn't it? Because I think that's a strong aspect of Reading, the community aspect. But people put in a lot of time into doing things which are not paid. Maybe money is not so important. Maybe there's actually other ways that people are rewarded, which could be part of a circular approach. But actually, in some way, maybe there is a way that could become people's living if we had a different mindset. Potentially, some of these things that people do out of the goodness of their hearts could actually become a way that they could make their living, potentially. It would be interesting to see if we could shift in that direction. So I've got a couple of questions here. There's another one from Howard. Howard Albertini is asking, is glue a significant problem? Does it make disassembly and recycling of products more problematic? Who would like to answer that one? Joe, would you like to have a go?
Yes.
Go for it.
Sorry. No, yes, it does.
It does. That's an easy one.
It's probably more complex than that. But with some, and it depends on the product, right? But typically, if we all think about smartphones in this case, typically to get them nice and small and attractive, there is large amounts of adhesive that's used in the screen, in the battery, which does frustrate things. So yes, it is problematic, but there's some innovations out there, like the company DSM, chemicals company, created something called Niaga, which is effectively like a reversible adhesive. So it's like glue that kind of acts like a screw. So and there's some amazing stuff that goes on in this world of sort of smart materials, where when they are exposed to some signal, whether it's a microwave signal or put in a vacuum or heated to a certain temperature, they do something. So it could be a screw that loses its thread, or an adhesive that becomes less sticky. So glues are really helpful for making stuff because you can make things really fast. But if we're going to talk about taking things apart at scale, in a sort of reverse, a disassembly line in a way, then we need to think about some inventive ways to do that, and smart materials can help. But also, if we can make the economics work, then labour can help there as well by using things like screws and getting more hands-on.
Indeed. I think it makes me think about tea bags, because that was a challenge there, wasn't it? What we call plastic in tea bags is effectively an adhesive that was enabling the two parts to be attached together. And I know that some tea bag producers were looking at only using paper and finding a way to knit that together. But then when you put it into hot water, something happened, like you were talking about, exposing something to an influence from outside, and it was then opening up. So it's quite challenging sometimes to find another way to make things behave as you want in the circumstance they need to face. But they're important challenges to go through, aren't they? I think. Yeah,
and especially, like, to your point, no large brand wants to mess up now, because the customers are pretty ruthless, and so are shareholders. So someone once said to me, the definition of a pioneer is someone with their face down in the mud with a spear in their back, and it's not always a safe place to be, being a pioneer. But thankfully, some companies are stepping out and taking that on and showing the way for the others.
Absolutely, that's important.
And I think also America should probably answer that, also given from the design side. So, for example, traditional PET bottles used to have the label stuck onto the PET bottles. and they were a real pain to recycle. And now if you take a PET bottle, you'll see that it's more a sleeve that slips on and slips off. So sticking a label onto a PET drinks bottle is considered a no-no. And it took a long time to do that. So yeah, glue is a pain. And again, with some careful design and some careful technology, you can move away from that.
One thing just to add is, you mentioned I'm a member of the Right to Repair coalition, and actually that's quite a lot going around that and thinking about how do we make sure that things are more repairable. And glue goes against actually that ability quite a lot to be able to repair a product. I think even the repair index in France now, which manufacturers have to look at their product and say how repairable it is. It's only for a few products, but they would actually get penalized for gluing parts together. So if I pull apart a product and I'm kind of assessing how well it's designed, eco-design, circular, repairability and all of that, you don't get bonus points for gluing stuff together.
Interesting. Yeah, it's these things which they appear small, but at scale they become important, and it does need a more considered approach, doesn't it? I think that's what the circularity is all about thinking beforehand and actually then following through.
Yeah. We had some soldered in batteries in electric toothbrushes at the weekend at the repair cafe. So.
Wow. Yeah, that's another type of glue, isn't it? It is reversible though. So I've got one hopefully final question, I think, now from Charlotte at Wild About Reading. Do you want to ask it yourself, Charlotte? Oh, I can ask it. So it's a question relating to Reading Festival. So she was asking, how do we solve the problem of music festivals like Reading Festival, Glastonbury, etc., where young punters leave all their cheap camping equipment on site, treating it as single use? Peter, do you want to come back about this, seeing as it's very much a Reading question?
Yeah, I thought that might come my way. It's a good question and not an easy one to answer. And it's one of those where, going back to my comments earlier, there are things that the local authority can do, and there are limits to that. So the regulatory process, because we license the festival, covers things like food safety and crowd safety and all that kind of public safety stuff. But there's less room for maneuver on the waste side. So I think constructive engagement with festival organisers, which is not just about Reading Festival, by the way, that's about that's another great thing about Reading is the number of festivals we have, but quite a few of them will generate their own sort of impacts. So again, in the climate strategy, there's a whole programme of conversations that are mapped out that we're having with festival organisers, with that ultimate goal of zero waste festivals being what we're working towards. Clearly, we're not there yet with all of them, but I think with goodwill, and there is a very serious and committed sustainability strategy that Festival Republic are pursuing, and within that some easy things that they can do and are doing, and some harder nuts to crack, which are going to take a bit more time.
Thanks. I add to that. I don't know if you remember, Catherine, I was involved in a few years ago, I call it my dirtiest fieldwork design research ever on festival waste stuff with Julie's Bicycle, which is a creative industries sustainability focused organisation, and they looked at a variety of things. And I think one thing was interesting, that when I did some secret shopping in some camping stores and said I was going to a festival, they're like, which one? And you kind of, Reading. And took me over to the kind of the pop-up camping ones and pretty much said, these ones are disposable. So, you can throw it as well. Plus they're, easy to pop up, but about 17, 18 instructions to pop it down, and 4 YouTube videos later, you might, so I think it's one of those things that there's so many, it has to be taken on by all kind of levers, both, engaging, assisting and the festival goers' behaviour. Have I frozen?
No, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. But then also responsibilities on manufacturers and the design of some of these throwaway tents in the first place. It's a good business stream for them, so they're quite happy with that. And then also policies, and what does a festival kind of let happen, and how can you crack down on that? So it's got to be all different approaches. And I mean, some festivals that are more eco or green, they don't have these issues as well. So I think linking nice back to Akil talking about that mindset and developing that mindset from all of those angles, that it's just not acceptable anymore.
So I've got one final question, but I don't know if there's time. Can I just ask you, Gurpreet, is there time to squeeze in one over larger scale question, or should we wrap up now?
I think if we can get a quick response from one of the panelists, that would be fabulous. It's a long one though.
Oh, yeah.
It might be better. Well, let's see. Do we have a panelist who's up for this one with a quick response?
So is the net zero CO2 target by 2050 possible when other parts of the world are putting in less effort than their respective countries?
Akil has been quiet. Go on, Akil. Give you the last big one.
Throw me under the bus just when. No, but Peter, you've been asking some very tough questions. I have to say. I like the way Peter quietly types in something really tough. No, but there's no right answer to this. No one knows if it's possible. Are we on the track to net zero by 2050? Definitely. Do we have to do more? 100% more. Yes. I think this is a decade of transformation, 2020 to 2030. A lot that we do now in this 10-year period will define how the next 20 years after that pans out. When it comes to the countries, I know what you're talking about. These are emerging markets. I come from one of them. So do some of the panelists. This is a political game. Climate change is going to be used as a negotiation tactic, be it getting a Security Council seat on the United Nations or what have you. India and China are going to start to toe the line. More than anything else, the countries themselves have so much of public sentiment that is starting to push climate change on the radar screens. It's not an election manifesto as yet. It is in Germany, where the Green Party is pretty much going to win, but it's not the case in emerging markets as yet. It is coming through the ranks. They're about 3 to 4 years behind. Can they afford to constantly arm twist and say, no, America, Europe, you've had a fill in terms of developing your part of the world. Now it's our chance. It won't happen. They'll have to start to toe the line. And I think that's not something to worry about in the longer term. But right now it's geopolitics. And they are going to play this out and try and negotiate as much as they can for now. And the US would have done exactly the same. So it's just what China and India are going to have to do for a while. And Brazil, of course.
Indeed. Right. Thank you very much, Gurpreet. I think over to you to.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Catherine, and a massive thanks to all our panelists. I've learnt a lot. Certainly more informed now about the circular economy and what's happening in Reading and some of the more intricate, nuances of the topic, which I wasn't aware of before. So I hope. If you join us today, you've taken one or two new insights, perhaps, that you didn't have before. It was also very encouraging, with people like Vivek and talking to Joe and Peter around some of the things that are already happening, both locally and more broadly. That's really, really encouraging. And kudos to people like Erica as well in terms of encouraging local businesses and organisations. And the community to move down this direction. It's going to be a very, very important facet of our net zero strategy. So thank you very much for joining us today. I just want to leave you with one or two messages. So thank you very much, and we'd love for you to join Ethical Ready. It's free. You can go to our website and join up, and you'll be informed of everything we do. We'd love for you to do that. We have recorded this session, and we will make it available on our YouTube channel in due course. And of course, we're on the usual social media channels as well. So do engage, and we'd love to see you on future sessions. And also, this is. As people were saying, this is one of the sessions for the Reading Climate Festival, and we hope you attend several more. There's still a couple of days, so thank you very much for joining, and see you next time.
Well, before anybody leaves, I've just put a link to the Ethical Reading Impact Report in the chat, so if you'd like to have a look about what we're doing, you can find that there.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Good evening.
Bye.
Bye.